hope this finds you well and cheerful. Well, I'm cheerful this morning and I'm feeling well because the golf course is open and I will be playing golf today. So if you find yourself walking anywhere near Pen Common this morning, I strongly recommend the use of a hard hat. Flat jackets are optional, especially if you're walking anywhere near the trees today. Please do take care because I'll be there today. Anyway, I shall be there hoping to hit the ball straight down the middle. Last happened about 15 years ago, but there we go, let's see what I can do. Now, this has to be, I'm afraid, the most corny preaching link I've ever had before, but the word straight, as in straight down the middle, reminds me of one of the great unsung heroes of the Bible. I want to tell you about this morning. One of the great unsung heroes. You may never have heard of him because he's unsung, but he does exist, and his name is Ananias. I'll talk to you about Ananias in a minute, why he's a great hero. But before we get to Ananias, I need to talk to you about somebody else who's another great hero of mine and a great hero of the Bible, but he's not unsung because he gets quite a lot of coverage. And he's got the name of St. Paul. Now, Paul, or St. Paul, was a well-known preacher. He founded many churches. He suffered a lot for his faith, but many people became Christians through his ministry. But he was not always the case. Earlier in his life, his name was Saul. He was brought up Jewish. And when Jesus died and rose from the dead, and when people started telling people that he'd risen from the dead, Saul had a massive problem with this. He hated this, and he hated it so much, he persecuted the new church. In fact, so much did he persecute the church, he ran out of Christians to persecute in Jerusalem. As I say, and he was so keen to persecute more, he went on a fact-finding mission, you might say, to Damascus to try and find some more Christians so he could persecute them there. You might say Saul had a problem with Christianity. But it's on the Damascus road that the following happens. And I'm reading now this morning, Acts chapter 9, starting at verse 1. Meanwhile, Saul, still breathing threats and murder against the disciples of the Lord, went to the high priest and asked him for letters to the synagogues at Damascus, so that if he found any who belonged to the way, men or women, he might bring them bound to Jerusalem. Now as he was going along and approaching Damascus, suddenly a light from heaven flashed around him. He fell to the ground and heard a voice saying to him, "Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me?" He asked, "Who are you, Lord?" The reply came, "I am Jesus, whom you are persecuting. But get up and enter the city, and you'll be told what you are to do." The men who were travelling with him stood speechless because they heard the voice but saw no one. Saul got up from the ground, and though his eyes were open, he could see nothing. So they led him by the hand and brought him into Damascus. For 3 days he was without sight, and neither ate nor drank. And this is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. So you have this Saul, this Christian hating, this fire breathing man on his fact finding mission to Damascus to try and find some more Christians. And as you can see, he has a major problem with the whole Jesus movement, the way it's called. Anyways, we would be well known for doing this. Living in Damascus at the time was a man called Ananias. So this is the way he comes back into the story. And Ananias is a Christian in Damascus. As I said, it was a dangerous time to be a Christian in those days. It still is in lots of ways, but it was very dangerous in those days. And Ananias has this vision, and God tells him, you're to go to somewhere, and you're going to meet this guy called Saul. And Ananias kind of responds to God as well. He might, well, hang on a minute, Lord, I've heard of this guy. He doesn't like people like me very much. He killed Stephen and various other helped with the killing of Stephen, and he's persecuting, and he's come here to find people like me and take them out to Jerusalem and to persecute the church. And the Lord tells him, look, you've got to meet him, and you've got to meet this guy because I have got great plans for him. And I think that is why Ananias is such a hero, albeit an unsung one, because firstly, he did what God said. And I think there is something enormously important about just doing what God says, trust and obey. And he didn't just say he believed in God. Ananias believed in God and trusted in God and did what God said. Second thing to say is he was prepared to do it at his own risk as well. I think for many of us, well, I think one of the problems the church has in the Western world is that it's just too soft in lots of ways. It's kind of, shall we, shall we pray, shall we go to church, or shall we follow Jesus? And it's all kind of a bit too easy, and I think it can be. Whereas Ananias here, for him, trusting in God actually meant risking his life. And I think we need to remember that there are brothers and sisters of ours across the world who do suffer for their faith, for whom, just going to church, for example, is a risky business. And I think we need to pray for them. And I think we need to appreciate Ananias' courage in doing this. I think the other thing, of course, is that, to put it bluntly, Ananias didn't judge by appearances. He didn't judge by reputations. He'd heard what Saul had done. He'd heard of this guy. He heard all the things that would have been said about him. But actually, Ananias is prepared to overlook that. And, he was prepared to walk by faith and not by sight. He was prepared to see in Saul what God saw in Saul, rather than what everybody else saw in Saul. And he took a risk. And then Saul, as I say, became a Christian, and the rest, as they say, is history. So Ananias, you may not have heard of him before today. I hope you're looking him up now, because he's a great unsung hero. Acts chapter 9. He was a great man because, firstly, he listened to God and did what God said. Secondly, he was prepared to take a risk in doing so. And thirdly, because he didn't judge by what he'd heard. He didn't judge by appearances. He saw in Saul what only God could see, and he saw what God had in mind for him. And so I want to say today, 3 cheers for Ananias. But why the link was straight? Well, actually, funnily enough, Ananias is told by God, he says, "Here I am, Lord," and the Lord tells him where to go. And he's told to meet Saul at a place called, a street called Straight, or Straight Street. And I really think it's quite lovely, actually, that Saul has this massive turnaround, having persecuted and there is, the church. He finally meets Jesus, and he's got to live with that, and he gets straightened round at a street called Straight. I like that, don't you? He gets straightened out at a street called Straight. Have a lovely day. Watch out if you're walking anywhere Pen Common this morning. Have a lovely day. And today, tribute unsung hero Ananias. God bless him, and have a lovely day.